By the time this video is out, Halloween will have come and gone. I'm unfortunately nowhere near organized enough in life at the moment to be able to plan a specialized video release like this. And besides, it may be hard to believe, but I'm not a pagan. On Halloween night, I sat in my home with the lights turned off, pretending I wasn't in. It was a working night, and I was tired. However, that's not to say that I didn't manage to get up to anything festive. Amnesia: The Dark Descent is a game that interests me greatly. But it's not for entirely normal reasons. And that's why this isn't really going to be a review like what I usually upload onto this channel. Because the senses of dread and horror which the game was designed to instill into players, and did so well in fact that it would go on to inspire the entire horror genre to come, has instead been replaced by nostalgia. That is perhaps the feeling I felt most prominently throughout my playthrough on Halloween. Not only was this the first horror game I'd ever played, but I also believe it may have been one of the few games that I actively sought out to get back then. In fact, I even remember getting a new graphics card for my piece of garbage Acer Tower just to be able to run it properly. That's how desperate I was. Discovering new games I liked before I reached my teenage years worked mostly like this. Either I got to try a game out at my friend's house or on my dad's computer, which is the case for many of the older games I've made videos about on this channel, or I would head to a game shop and just pick a box I thought looked interesting. An example of that is Far Cry 2, and you can watch a video about that game here if you want. The way I discovered Amnesia, however, is a completely different story. And for me, that story begins with a single man. What was then a fresh, maidenless, and dare I say, Bjornless Swede. Shit, wrong channel. Alexa, load up lazy YouTuber Persona Core. When PewDiePie uploaded his original playthrough of Amnesia: The Dark Descent, the videos weren't accumulating as many views as you might expect. It is quite hard to imagine now a PewDiePie with only a little over 2,000 subscribers, but alas, you have to start somewhere. The last episode of his Amnesia playthrough came out at the tail end of January in 2011. If you're watching this video, chances are that, like me, you weren't among the 1,750 people that tuned in to watch it half a month after it came out, which is when this snapshot on Wayback Machine was taken. Not even 1 year later though, and already you are far more likely to stumble upon one of his 100,000 plus view videos on your YouTube homepage. This sudden growth in popularity came around as a result of some changes Felix had made to his content. While he was still uploading full, largely unedited playthroughs of horror games just like he did with Amnesia, the addition of a face cam to capture his live reactions to the games he was playing offered an entirely new entertainment factor to his videos. Because now, you weren't just watching him play scary horror games to get scared yourself. You were mostly watching to see him freak out, like sitting on the sofa next to your buddy trying to gauge how scared he was. However, his most successful content came in a very unique format for the time. The birth of the montage videos.
It's raping time!
It's easy to make fun of young Zoomers and Gen Alphas nowadays by remarking on their decline in general attention spans, and really, the number of views these horror montage videos were getting back around 2011 and 2012 don't help to dispel these types of digs. It's genius, really. Instead of having to sit through entire multi-episode playthroughs, patiently waiting for a funny freakout moment which may or may not even happen, why not distill all of the funny parts of a playthrough into a digestible 6-minute long package? Well, 4 minutes really, with 2 minutes at the end where he just talks to you with background music playing, like, what was old YouTube, man?
How's it going, my bros? My name is PewDiePie.
In the form of a video titled something like Funny! Amnesia Scary Moments with Facecam. Episode 4. You see, even with the original playthrough of the main story of Amnesia The Dark Descent, now ascending ever farther in Felix's rearview mirror, the game nonetheless became both what he was largely known for, as well as a massive part of his identity. I mean, for the longest time, his profile picture on YouTube featured the Servant Grunt, the most common monster enemy featured in the game. Amnesia itself also continued to feature heavily in his content for many years after the original playthrough, thanks to one specific feature which proved to be instrumental to its success. One that I will save for later in this video. One thing is for sure though, when it came to me, personally, it was these videos that put Amnesia The Dark Descent on my radar. Frictional Games was working under some rather tight budgetary constraints when developing Amnesia. A specific figure available online is 360,000 USD. Creative director Thomas Grip spends a lot of time talking about this in a video interview on Ars Technica.
But then the contract broke down, and as we were running out of money, we thought, okay, what do we know we're good at? Because making the game we're currently making is not working. None of the ideas are working.
He goes on to say that working on a budget did end up working in the game's favor, resulting in a product with a simple but very clear creative direction. They didn't have the money on hand to be able to cram any and all of the different features they maybe wanted to have, so instead, they were kind of forced to focus down on what really mattered. This isn't a review of Amnesia per se, and I probably don't need to tell you about how well this ended up working for them in the end, seeing how you can find the fingerprints of Amnesia The Dark Descent's game design in horror games to this day, 14 years later mind you. Nonetheless, the flip side of these types of budgetary constraints also means that advertising your new game to potential customers isn't exactly cheap. 2 days after the game was released, a gameplay trailer for Amnesia The Dark Descent was uploaded on the Frictional Games YouTube channel, garnering around 60,000 views by the 4th of February 2011. Other than that, however, Frictional was kind of at the mercy of whatever publicity they managed to get through publishing the game on online game retailers like Steam, as well as any returning customers familiar with the Penumbra series up to that point. Arguably more effective than that, though, was word-of-mouth marketing, particularly thanks to the growing popularity of video sharing platforms like YouTube.com. This is perhaps the thing that interests me about Amnesia above all else, because it may very well be the first example of a game's popularity exploding largely due to fan coverage on YouTube specifically. This game went from selling 36,000 copies within the first month of release to 200,000 just 3 months later, doubling the expected sales of 100,000 set internally by Frictional. Granted, there were other factors which helped influence a lot of these early sales. In a game developer article in January of 2011, Grip attributes the unexpected rise in revenue to a Steam holiday sale, as well as 3 nominations at the then upcoming Independent Games Festival, both of which gave Amnesia some much needed publicity. But 2 years after the initial release, during which time Let's Players, as well as videos of the game really began raking in the views on YouTube, they were up to 1.36 million copies sold, earning this independent developer studio $3.6 million on a comparatively measly $360,000 investment. I don't think that's a coincidence. Okay, I do have to admit that my judgment on this may be tainted by my own personal experience, and I am genuinely interested to hear about how you were originally exposed to Amnesia The Dark Descent in the comments below. Were you introduced to it through a different YouTuber at the time?
Oh shit, I have a bag of Milky Way.
Oh my god!
Or were you perhaps already aware of Frictional Games through the Penumbra series even before this? For my young teenage self, as kind of cringe as it is to say, videos like this And this advertised the game to a much greater extent than any other medium could have at the time, for better and for worse. Because before these videos, I didn't know that Amnesia, or frictional games for that matter, even existed. They showcased gameplay that was almost sandbox-like in nature, with an interactable environment unlike anything I had ever seen before in a game. One that you'd have to use to its fullest advantage, as unlike most other horror games before it, you had no direct way of defending yourself from the horrors you might encounter. The HPL2 engine has a very unique look to it. It has this ability to make certain environments look completely dim and creepy on one hand, while on the other, very cozy and inviting, mostly down to its lighting, which also played a massive part in the gameplay of Amnesia. But the most attractive thing about Amnesia, the thing that allowed content creators to milk it for years to come, as well as what convinced me to get my hands on it, was custom stories. For the 5 of you who may not know what I'm talking about, Amnesia released with the HPL2 engine editor tools. You used to have to download them from their website, whereas now they actually come pre-installed with the Steam version. These tools gave everyone who wanted it the type of power to create new maps, stories, items and monster models, which were basically on par with what the developers at Frictional Games had to work with when creating the game. One night, whilst writing the script for this video, I decided to jump on the level editor. And after getting used to some of the more strange controls, like how you have to hold Alt to move the camera, I proceeded to waste something like 2 hours building one room, just because of how much fun it was to do. All one needs to start making their own stories, with many different intertwining levels and puzzles, is some basic knowledge of how the ancient hieroglyphic script of C++ works, which, yeah, wasn't exactly computing with my 14-year-old brain back when I was last trying to actually make something like this. My biggest achievement then was figuring out how to script a key to unlock a fucking door. Nonetheless, this was an amazing inclusion to the game, offering what could potentially be a never-ending stream of user-made content to what is otherwise a 5 to 7 hour experience with little short-term replay value. It was these custom stories that made Amnesia thrive in the YouTube space, both in serious attempts at trying to create some extremely impressive and unique maps, ones that really tried to capture that sense of horror, but also total conversion mods which took the game in a completely different direction, as well as complete and utter shitposts. Here's a fun drinking game you can play with your friends. Download like, I don't know, 10, maybe 20 random custom stories and take a drink if you manage to find this little guy anywhere within the first, say, 3 rooms from where you spawn. Maybe include some bonus shots for unintelligible English and epic derp speak, as well as a jarring lack of background music when you first load into the game. Not only will you be completely shit-faced by the end of it, but it's also a surprisingly good way of telling whether a custom story is going to be worth your time or not. If you are lucky enough to not know what this is referring to, this is Stefano. Stefano is a little gold statue you can find towards the end of Amnesia's main story. I don't know, nor do I really care, when exactly this happened, but Stefano became one of the handful of memes that were heavily associated with PewDiePie's Amnesia videos. When I said that this game continued to show up a lot in his content, even after completing the main game, you have custom stories to thank for that. What this meant was that a lot of school-aged, shall we call them, entrepreneurs, started to realize something. I bet I can make a map for Pewds. I can fill it with jump scares around every corner for maximum knowledge. Teleporting naked guys! And I'll fill it with all the references. The chairs, the barrels. I'll have an entire room dedicated to Stefano. And then Pewds is gonna play it in the video and he's gonna scream at the bros and he's gonna fuck the pig on the bed. Oh, the thought is so tantalizing, I can't help myself.
Share mode activated. Beep.
I actually find this in itself incredibly interesting, as I can't really think of anything even remotely similar to this in terms of community engagement with a creator. All you could do prior to this was, I guess, leave a comment or upload a reply video when those were still a thing. Now you could make custom maps for this new popular game? fill it with YouTuber references, and maybe even have it featured in one of their videos. That's certainly unique for the time, and really, not much like this has managed to stick around today. What, you gonna make a Squid Game Fortnite map for Ninja to stream? Good luck, pipsqueak. What followed, however, was an influx of Baby's First Custom Story submissions on ModDB and the Frictional Games forums. The latter of which also saw a lot of posts around this time titled something like, "Script help!" or "I need help with scripts." Bonus points if the first sentence in the description mentions something about this being the creator's first map, so please be kind. It wasn't just PewDiePie's viewers that were doing this, by the way. It is quite lopsided to that community though, just because of the size of the 9-year-old army compared to some other YouTubers that were making content on the game around this time. These were a great deal more fun to watch someone play rather than playing them yourself, and may very well be the first example of YouTuber bait, at least in the gaming space. Because they have absolutely zero value if they're not up on your screen with someone else's facecam. Who's going to overreact to the 30th naked body being flung towards him with an ear-piercing sound effect?
You ready? Oh!
That was it.
I mentioned earlier that videos like that of PewDiePie around this time made me really want to get my hands on Amnesia. Well, these same videos ended up having another quite interesting effect on me as I went back to this game and played through it for this video. Before that though, it is actually fortunate in a way that Felix started getting popular on content based around custom stories. Since I never watched those original videos where he completed the main game, I was able to go into Amnesia and experience it properly from start to finish for the first time. I did play through a lot of it years ago, but as I've said quite a few times in my videos by now, I really didn't give much of a fuck about stories in games when I was young. I had a great time uncovering the secrets of Brennenburg Castle and what was going on inside of it. Even the simple act of finding these letters which progressively unearthed Daniel's dark descent into madness proved to be immensely satisfying in the end. This, combined with the puzzle-solving aspect to this game, was the fun part for me. The atmosphere in this game holds up incredibly well. The only thing about it that made me crack up was when towards the end of the game, it started to feel like I accidentally stumbled upon Alexander's Goon Cave. Oh my god, it is a sex dungeon, what the fuck? Bro, with the cuck chair? No. As for the actual moment-to-moment horror, it really didn't have much of an effect on me. The reason for this I can pinpoint quite easily. I'm not the type of person who never gets scared by horror games. Sure, if I die to the xenomorph a couple of times in Alien Isolation, I might get desensitized to that particular set piece. But when I finally get past it, I am not above shitting my britches in the next area when I get caught lacking. But with Amnesia, I've seen the servant grunt memed on thumbnails so often, seen and played so many custom stories that lazily throw things in your face to try and get a cheap jump scare out of the player, seen so many montages of the game with goofy sound effects and joke subtitles, that the more visceral horror elements of this game have, unfortunately, become demystified. The only thing I felt walking around the dark, atmospheric halls of Brennenburg Castle was nostalgia. Even the famous chase siren that plays when you get spotted by a monster, which a lot of people still mention as being a very effective part of the game, felt like it was referencing a joke. Like I was about to hear someone else do a funny scream. And that is the double-edged sword of the sort of YouTube success an indie horror game like Amnesia can inherit. This video was a little bit different compared to my usual review format, so if you're a regular viewer, thanks for sticking around. Amnesia: The Dark Descent has had a plethora of videos going over just how scary it is, how well its simple gameplay plays into the horror experience, while also usually mentioning just how influential it was to the horror genre even to this day. However, it's quite rare that these videos go into much detail about the relationship this game had with the early 2010s internet for a couple of years after its release, other than simply mentioning how it was pretty much responsible for starting up a handful of YouTube careers. Whereas for me, this is something about this game that I find to be the most interesting. This game did start a lot of careers on this platform, but without those videos, I don't know if Amnesia would have been as much of a success as it ended up being. Frictional would have probably made a profit on it, I'm sure, but would they have been able to make 10 times the budget in a span of 2 years? I don't know for sure. I think YouTube had a massive part in making this game the phenomenon that it was, but it is important to stress that I don't think this would have been the case without both the game just being good, but more importantly, having a feature like custom stories. For better or for worse, considering the quality of some of the maps that came out around this time, they did serve in the game's favor in 2 ways. First, they showed that you can make more content for this game, and that there was a community of people that continued to make great custom stories even many years after the game first launched. This greatly increased the longevity of Amnesia for both players and content creators alike, the latter offering a longer period of time for new people to still come and discover this game. And second, since no one of note seemed to be interested in making videos about the main story past like 2011, you could get this game and have a whole side of it still left to explore all on your own. But of course, there is a flip side. The most important thing about horror in media involves fearing that which you do not know. And while I do think that YouTube in the early 2010s had a big hand in making Amnesia: The Dark Descent into such a big success for Frictional Games, the one thing those videos also did, at least for me, is demystify it.
I want you to subscribe to me
Scav Merchant Hub
on YouTube. Thank you, cringe. Bye.